What if I told you that one of the WNBA's biggest secrets was just blown wide open by a role player no one saw coming? Because when Sophie Cunningham stepped in to defend Caitlin Clark, it wasn't just a teammate backing up a rookie, it was the spark that set the league's biggest lie on fire, and the flames are still burning. This wasn't your average foul. This wasn't some viral highlight. This was a direct challenge to the system. For months, fans have been asking, is Caitlin Clark being targeted? The league says no. Players say it's just rookie hazing, and critics call it conspiracy. But when Sophie Cunningham said "fuck it" and threw that hit, she wasn't just reacting, she was revealing the quiet conversations happening in locker rooms, revealing the jealous undercurrent that's been bubbling under the surface, revealing a league that's been profiting off Clark's fame while silently letting her get battered night after night. And suddenly, everyone watching had the same thought. Wait, what if the fans were right all along? For months, the league has been running the same PR playbook. Nothing to see here, just standard rookie treatment. Everyone goes through this. They told us Caitlin Clark was just experiencing what every rising star deals with. A little extra contact, a little rougher defense, nothing personal. Just part of earning respect in the W. And if you dared to question it, you were labeled a casual, a hater, worse, a conspiracy theorist. The message was loud and clear. This is normal. Clark's fine. Stop overreacting. But here's the problem. Fans weren't blind. They saw it with their own eyes. Hard fouls that went uncalled. Shoves after the whistle. Veterans going out of their way to knock Clark off her rhythm. And not once did the league step in to say, enough. Every week the excuses piled up. She needs to toughen up. She's not the only one taking hits. She's just not used to the physicality. But then came Sophie Cunningham, and in less than 60 seconds, she did what the league had refused to do for months. Tell the truth. She confirmed the whispers, the patterns, the bias. She exposed the real conversations happening behind closed doors. And she burned the rookie hazing narrative straight to the ground. This wasn't tough love. This was a coordinated campaign, and Sophie had the receipts. Before June 17, 2025, Sophie Cunningham was exactly the kind of player the league loves: tough, reliable, and quiet. She showed up, played hard, kept her head down, and didn't make waves. A textbook role player. She had a respectable following, 200,000 on TikTok, about 350,000 on Instagram. Not enough to be considered a face of the league, but enough to stay relevant. Most casual fans might have recognized her name, maybe even caught a few of her three-pointers on highlight reels. But let's be honest, she wasn't on anyone's radar as a disruptor. She was just another grinder in the W. Teammates respected her, coaches trusted her, but the media barely paid attention. She wasn't in commercials, she wasn't on ESPN panels, she didn't have a shoe deal, and she definitely wasn't getting headline coverage for anything outside of basketball. Sophie was steady. Not a star, not a problem, just part of the machine. And maybe that's exactly why her explosion hit so hard. Because no one saw it coming. When fans tune in to that Connecticut Sun game, they weren't expecting anything unusual. Another rough game for Clark? Probably. A few elbows, a hard screen, maybe a scuffle? Sure. That had become routine. But what they didn't expect was the quiet role player, the one who'd spent years flying under the radar, to suddenly become the center of the basketball world. Because when Sophie stepped in, she didn't just commit a hard foul. She lit the fuse, and the blast zone reached far beyond the court. What happened next wasn't manufactured. It wasn't PR. It wasn't a calculated media play. It was raw. It was real. It was one woman finally snapping under the weight of months, maybe years, of watching the same story unfold over and over. And the moment she acted, everything changed. In just 48 hours, Sophie Cunningham went from basketball background character to a full-blown cultural phenomenon. On the surface, June 17th was just another regular season game, Indiana Fever versus Connecticut Sun. Another night where Caitlin Clark would step onto the court, carry the weight of an entire league spotlight, and endure the kind of physical punishment that had become her new normal. But from the opening minutes, something felt off.
Clark wasn't just being defended aggressively, she was being hunted. Elbows after passes, shoulders into screens, shoves that came long after the whistle. The kind of treatment you don't usually see unless there's bad blood or a target painted on someone's back. And through it all, the officials, silent. Clark was visibly shaken. She was frustrated, wincing, even rubbing her eye after taking a poke from JCS Sheldon. Marina Mabrey had shoved her to the ground earlier that week. Now it was Sheldon's turn. And once again, there was no call, no warning, just another shrug from the refs and play moved on. For Sophie Cunningham, sitting on the bench and watching it unfold in real time, something snapped. She later described it as a last-second intrusive thoughts moment, one of those gut-level instincts that overrides everything else. Strategy, consequence, reputation. She saw what was happening, saw the officials doing nothing, saw Clark standing there alone and thought, "Fuck it." Her words, not ours. In that instant, Sophie leapt into action. She stormed the court and delivered a hard, physical foul, one that left no room for misinterpretation. This wasn't a basketball play. It was a message. It was the first time someone said enough with their chest. The refs blew the whistle. Sophie was ejected. She walked off the court without apology, without a backward glance. Her fine came later, $900, barely more than a slap on the wrist. But the effect? Immediate, explosive, global. Over 1 million new followers in just 2 days. Her jersey? Sold out. Sports media outlets scrambled to analyze the moment. And perhaps most telling of all, no one, not one person in the league or media, called her wrong. Because deep down, everyone watching knew exactly what that foul was about. It was about months of silence finally breaking. It was about calling BS on the league's nothing to see here narrative. It was about standing up for a teammate when no one else would. And it wasn't choreographed. It wasn't manufactured outrage. As Sophie said herself, that moment came from a place of real, boiling frustration. She wasn't playing to the cameras. She was done pretending things were okay. But what made this moment truly unforgettable wasn't just the foul. It was what came next. Because Sophie wasn't finished. She wasn't just going to make a statement with her body, she was going to use her voice. And when she opened her mouth, she torched the WNBA's carefully crafted image from the inside. In any other game, a hard foul like Sophie's might have been forgotten within hours. A fine, a few angry tweets, maybe a suspension, and everyone moves on. But this one was different because this wasn't just about basketball. Sophie Cunningham's foul was the first public act of defiance against a system that had quietly failed Caitlin Clark over and over again. It wasn't just physical, it was symbolic. A message not just to the opposing team, but to the league, the refs, and every player standing on the sidelines pretending they didn't see what was happening. And that message was simple. I see it. I'm done with it. And I'm not staying quiet anymore. Within 48 hours, Sophie's world flipped upside down. Over 1 million new followers in just 2 days. Her jersey sold out in every size. Mainstream media coverage that had never once cared about her career until now. And perhaps most surprising of all, a podcast deal with Colin Cowherd's network. Just days before, Sophie had been a quiet contributor, a role player. Now she was trending above MVPs, dominating headlines, and being rebranded by fans as something entirely new. The enforcer, the bodyguard, the one who finally said something. But beyond the social media explosion, there was something much more personal happening, something that fans didn't see on camera. After the game, back in the Indiana Fever locker room, Sophie sat down and looked across at Caitlin Clark. No big speeches, no drama, just one moment that said everything. Clark looked at her and said, one word, finally. That one word hit like a hammer. It meant that Clark, the most talked about player in women's basketball, had been waiting, not for a foul, not for a viral clip, but for someone to have her back. Someone to say, "You're not imagining this. You don't deserve this. And I've got you." Sophie's response? "I got you." That was the shift. Not just in their relationship, but in the entire energy around the team. For the first time, Indiana Fever wasn't just relying on Clark to carry them, they were rallying around her. And it didn't end when they left the court, because the moment Sophie opened her mouth and started telling the truth about what was really happening behind the scenes, in locker rooms, in team huddles, in whispered conversations, the entire league felt it. This was no longer about one rookie. It was about something much bigger. And Sophie Cunningham had just kicked open the door. The cameras only show what the league wants you to see. Highlights, smiles, and choreographed post-game interviews. But according to multiple reports and whispers from former players, something darker was unfolding behind those closed doors. It started with Caitlin Clark's early weeks in the league. Despite her record-breaking college career and massive fan base, she was met with cold shoulders, passive-aggressive comments, and even outright hostility. Not just from rivals, but allegedly from teammates. One former WNBA player, speaking anonymously to a podcast, dropped this chilling line. They didn't want her to shine. She was never supposed to be the face of this league. And the pushback started from day one. What kind of pushback? Isolated during team bonding events? Whispers that she was a media puppet? Jealousy over endorsement deals from Nike and State Farm that veterans never got, even after years in the league? Even more shocking, there were rumors that certain players had a silent pact, an unspoken code to humble Clark. Not career-ending fouls, nothing illegal, but hard screens, trash talk, and just enough on-court disrespect to chip away at her confidence. And it was working, until Sophie Cunningham broke the code. Sophie had heard the locker room chatter. She knew which players were calling Clark princess behind her back. She saw the side eyes when Caitlin got her own media day. And maybe most infuriating of all, she saw coaches and vets allowing it to happen. That's when she made her choice. No more silence. No more pretending everything was fine. Because here's what most fans didn't realize. Sophie had once been Caitlin. She came into the league with hype, fire, and a target on her back. She was mocked for being too aggressive, too emotional, too white, even. She learned the hard way how brutal the WNBA culture could be, especially to newcomers who weren't part of the established inner circle. So when she saw history repeating itself, she decided to do what no one did for her. Speak up, hit back, expose the system. And that's exactly what she started doing in subtle yet powerful ways. On her podcast appearances, she didn't name names, but she called out the double standards. She talked about players who act like gatekeepers and coaches who play favorites based on legacy, not performance. She spoke in coded language, but fans knew who she was talking about. And suddenly, everything changed. Comment sections exploded, clips of her interviews went viral, and fans started digging, comparing foul stats, minutes played, even mic'd up footage that showed how differently Clark was being treated. This wasn't just drama anymore. It was a full-blown reckoning. Because if even half of what Sophie hinted at was true, then the WNBA wasn't just hostile to Caitlin Clark, it was hostile to change. By this point, it was no longer just about Sophie Cunningham, or even Caitlin Clark. What was unfolding felt calculated. Over multiple games, a clear pattern began to emerge. Caitlin Clark was being fouled harder, shoved off ball, and jawed at more than any other rookie in the league. And yet, when fans waited for the league to respond, to protect its biggest young star, nothing. No statements, no suspensions, not even a whispered warning. The silence was deafening. And it wasn't just fans who noticed. Analysts started pulling clips, dozens of plays where Clark took hits without a single whistle. Slow motion footage showed her being elbowed, hip-checked, and dragged down, all dismissed as part of the game. But was it? Because when another rookie, one not named Caitlin Clark, took a similar hit, the league responded instantly. Fines, flagrant calls, even ejections. So why was Clark treated differently? Some insiders believe it was intentional, that the WNBA leadership, worried about alienating its veteran stars, chose to look the other way. After all, Caitlin Clark represented something they couldn't fully control, a media machine.
A new demographic, a face the old guard didn't choose. Let's be real. Clark's rise didn't come from within the WNBA bubble. She exploded from college courts to national headlines, bringing with her millions of fans who had never watched a WNBA game before. And that made some people very uncomfortable. Former coaches, speaking off the record, hinted that some in the league office feared Clark's fame would overshadow the culture they had worked so hard to build. And so, a dangerous message was quietly sent. We won't protect you unless you play by our rules. But here's the problem. Caitlin did play by the rules. She never fired back publicly, never called anyone out by name. She just kept showing up, game after game, trying to prove she belonged. And the more silent she stayed, the louder her fan base grew. That's when the league's silence started to backfire. Twitter turned into a war zone. Podcasters tore into WNBA execs. Even former NBA stars began weighing in, calling out what they saw as blatant targeting and league-wide hypocrisy. And at the center of it all, a rookie just trying to play basketball. And a veteran like Sophie Cunningham, who finally said what others were too scared to admit. This league won't grow if we keep tearing down the very players bringing in new fans. It was no longer about rivalries. It was about systemic rot. And the public wasn't going to stay quiet any longer. The WNBA had a message, loud, polished, and corporate approved. In press conferences, league officials proudly announced record-breaking viewership. Sponsorship surged. TV ratings skyrocketed. The narrative was clear. The league was finally having its moment. And at the center of the surge, Caitlin Clark. Her debut alone shattered viewership records. She sold out arenas the league couldn't fill before. She moved more merchandise in weeks than some franchises had in years. But here's the catch. The same system profiting from Clark's fame wasn't protecting her. That's where the $1 billion hypocrisy began. Because while the league cashed in on Clark's image, splashing her across promos, highlight reels, and sponsorship packages, behind the scenes, she was taking more hits than praise. It was exploitation, wrapped in empowerment. And fans weren't blind. They watched Clark's bruises pile up while the league posted glossy ads saying, "We stand for our players." They heard broadcasters hype Clark as the future, even as veteran stars took cheap shots with no consequences. One moment summed it all up. During a nationally televised game, Clark took a flagrant foul that sent her crashing to the court. No review, no escalation, just silence. And yet, within 24 hours, the same league used her image in a promotional video titled, "The Future is Now." The audacity wasn't just offensive, it was insulting. Because if the future is now, why wasn't the future being protected? Why wasn't she given the same respect, the same safety as the very players whose careers she was helping revive? It wasn't just Caitlin. Other rising stars began to notice the double standard too. A whisper turned into a murmur, then into public frustration. The league wanted the numbers, the clout, the headlines, but not the accountability that came with them.
And fans, especially the new ones, weren't playing along. You could feel it in the comments. You could see it in the reaction videos. Protect Clark or lose us all. That was the message. Because here's the truth. You can't build a billion-dollar empire on someone's back, then stay silent while they're being targeted game after game. It's not just bad optics, it's a betrayal. And players like Sophie Cunningham knew it. She wasn't just defending a teammate, she was calling out a broken system, one that would celebrate your highlights at noon and leave you bleeding by midnight. The league had a choice: protect the players who built the brand or protect the brand at their expense. And fans were watching closely to see which side they'd choose. Up until that point, most players were quiet, some out of fear, others out of loyalty, and many because speaking out against the league meant risking your future in it. But Sophie Cunningham didn't care. After the now infamous Connecticut Sun game, when elbows were flying and respect was nowhere to be found, Sophie had enough. She didn't hold back in post-game interviews. She didn't use vague language or tiptoe around the issue. She called it what it was: bullying, intentional targeting, a system that protected certain players and ignored others, and a locker room culture that punished newcomers instead of nurturing them. Her words weren't just bold, they were dangerous, because in the WNBA, calling out the establishment could mean fines, suspensions, or worse, getting blacklisted. But Sophie didn't flinch. "If we don't speak up now, when will we?" she said. And that question hit harder than any foul on the court. Suddenly, the narrative shifted. This wasn't just about one game or one player. It was about the league's future. And Sophie became the face of a growing rebellion, players who were done being silent. You'd expect the WNBA to act quickly. After all, this wasn't a small controversy. It was playing out on national TV. Fans were furious. Media outlets were picking sides. Even NBA stars were tweeting about the disrespect Clark was facing. But what did the league do? They issued a vague statement. No names, no specific incidents addressed, just a generic note about protecting the integrity of the game and valuing all our players. It was corporate cowardice. Instead of addressing the real issue that their rising star was being physically and verbally targeted, they deflected. No suspensions, no fines, no rule clarifications. Just silence and a hope that fans would move on. But they didn't, because by now this wasn't just about Clark or Cunningham. It was about every player who came into the league with promise only to find themselves punished for shining too bright too fast. And the league's response? It wasn't just weak, it was a betrayal. Fans had seen the replays, they'd heard the boos, they watched Clark get thrown to the floor while refs swallowed the whistle. And when the league finally spoke, it said nothing at all. That silence, it said more than any press release ever could. It told players that if they didn't fit the old guard's mold, they were on their own. It told fans that viewership and merchandise sales mattered more than players' safety and fairness. And most of all, it proved that Sophie was right to speak out, because if she hadn't, who would have?
No names, no specific incidents addressed, just a generic note about protecting the integrity of the game and valuing all our players. It was corporate cowardice. Instead of addressing the real issue that their rising star was being physically and verbally targeted, they deflected. No suspensions, no fines, no rule clarifications, just silence and a hope that fans would move on. But they didn't, because by now, this wasn't just about Clark or Cunningham. It was about every player who came into the league with promise, only to find themselves punished for shining too bright, too fast. And the league's response? It wasn't just weak, it was a betrayal. Fans had seen the replays. They'd heard the boos. They watched Clark get thrown to the floor while refs swallowed the whistle. And when the league finally spoke, It said nothing at all. That silence, it said more than any press release ever could. It told players that if they didn't fit the old guard's mold, they were on their own. It told fans that viewership and merchandise sales mattered more than player safety and fairness. And most of all, it proved that Sophie was right to speak out. Because if she hadn't, who would have? So now you've seen the truth. This wasn't just a viral moment. It wasn't just one game. It was a crack in the foundation of a league that claims to empower, but often silences. Sophie Cunningham didn't just throw a foul. She threw down a challenge to the league, to the media, to the fans. And now, it's your move. If you believe in truth over politics, sports over agendas, and fairness over favoritism, drop a comment below. Should Sophie be punished or praised? Tag someone who still thinks this was just basketball. Subscribe for more unfiltered sports stories the media won't tell you. Because here, we don't sell narratives, we expose them. And remember, this isn't just about one player. It's about every voice that's ever been told to stay quiet and finally decided not to.